Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dan Hare. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Forefront, and I look after eShot. And today, hopefully, you can see and hear me nice and clearly. For those of you who are just arriving, somebody else already confirmed there was no audio issues. So if you have got video or audio issues, it's you, not me, I'm afraid. What we're going to talk about in today's session is forms and landing pages, a couple of the functions on eShot, which you may or may not be au fait with. So what I'm going to try and do today is give everyone an overview of both of these functions and make sure everyone is on the same landing page. We'll start with the forms element, and before I kind of dig into the detail of what we can do with eShot forms, I just want to explain the various different aspects of the form, because it's not just the form. There is branding, there is a confirmation page. In other words, when someone fills in the form, how do you reassure them that they have completed the form? There's then an opt-in email, which does a similar thing, confirms to them that they have actually managed to fill in the form, but it also gives you the opportunity to confirm that they should be added to your database. There's then a final confirmation page. So yes, that's after they've confirmed that they want to opt in. And then after that, there is an optional step to actually send a welcome email, which actually a lot of people don't do, but is often a very good shout, because those tend to be very highly engaged with emails. And then towards the end of the first part of the session, from the perspective of the forms, I'm going to talk about the publishing options. In other words, how do you use our forms elsewhere on the internet? So let's say there's quite a lot to forms, more than you might realize. And the purpose of today really is to give you an overview of the functionality. For those of you who are already used to it, you may be surprised. We've made a few updates recently. For those of you who are new to it, then don't worry, I'll be going through everything top to bottom. So when we say a form, effectively what we're talking about is a sign-up form. In other words, get somebody to fill in their details and submit their information to you. And if we look at that process inside eShot, it starts off when you create a sign-up form with you selecting the fields that you would like to be included on the form. Okay, so obviously we have system defaults like email, first name, last name, etc., etc. But you can also create any number of custom business objects as well. So you can create custom fields, and indeed you can add those fields to the forms. For those of you who are used to this, one thing you might notice that we now have the required function in the form builder. So if you do want to ensure that people must fill in a certain field, you can set that within the UI, so it forces people to complete certain fields. The other thing is the types of fields we've enhanced as well. So therefore, if we look at, for example, birthday there, if we want to make that a required field, because it's a special kind of field, a birthday field, a date field, when that actually appears on a sign-up form, it will automatically format it into a date field where people have the drop-downs for the different options. So by default, most fields will be text fields, and they can put whatever they like in there. But when you have special kinds of fields like date fields, then the form will automatically format that field accordingly. Another more recent piece of functionality that we introduced was the ability to create pick lists. So this is where you can actually take a normal field and restrict the values that are allowed in it from the perspective of a sign-up form. So in your contacts field manager, now that's something that only administrators will have access to, you can actually set a pick list for your field. And what that enables you to do is say, well, when I want someone to complete this form, rather than it being free text entry, they have to choose from a list of options. And indeed, that list of options can be customized and indeed updated. So if it does change, you can amend the pick list, and those updates will automatically populate any forms which possess that field. So that's really good when you want to ensure that you capture structured data as opposed to unstructured text, which you would normally expect to have in normal text fields. How that then manifests itself in the published sign-up form is it then just simply appears as a drop-down on the sign-up form. So if you add a pick list field to your sign-up form, then it will automatically display the pick list type of field on the form. Now we move on to the kind of personal aspects of setting up the form. We've chosen our fields. The next thing is we can give people the option to opt in to certain preferences. Okay, and this is something which often causes confusion. We have preferences and we have groups. Preferences I would generally describe as options where people choose whether to be on a list that you send emails to, in other words, a particular type of newsletter. And then groups we tend to use for lists where you are manually curating who you decide to send emails to. Okay, so the two functions are very similar, but what we tend to recommend is you don't overlap them. In other words, you set preferences for things where you want to give people an overt choice of whether to opt in or out of something, and groups you use for your kind of more administrative purposes behind the scenes. So for example, here, I can choose to add 3 preferences to this form. And there you see those 2 options there, visible to the user and hidden from the user. And the reason why we have that, I'll explain more in a minute. But effectively, when you add preferences to the form in the visible field, what then happens is they become available as checkboxes in the form. Okay, so where I've added those 3 preferences, you then see choose preferences 1, 2, 3. Okay, and indeed it can be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on and so forth. You can have multiple sign-up forms. You don't have to put every single preference that you have on your account on a form. And indeed, I'd say there is a strong use case for having more dedicated sign-up forms for specific preferences, or maybe a batch of preferences which logically overlap. If you do have lots and lots of preferences, then we do have the concept of a kind of main sign-up form where everybody can sign up to everything and anything, but we tend to see response rates on those are lower because you overwhelm people with choice. So if you want people to fill in the form, the less fields, the less choices they have to make to fill in the form, the better. And that's where you then have the hidden from user option on the other side. So we would normally recommend this is only used for a single preference. So in other words, if you don't want to give people the checkbox options in terms of selecting preferences in the form, if you just want them to sign up to your particular newsletter, you can hide that preference from the user. So the sign up form will work the same way, but they won't have to check the box for that particular preference because there is only one preference on the page. So that's the distinction between visible to the user and hidden from the user. And the same thing applies for the next part of setting up a form, groups. You can make groups visible to the user as well. And indeed, you can make groups hidden from the user. So for example, you may choose to have a group which you use for housekeeping purposes, just to track everyone who's come from a particular sign-up form. As I said, most of the time we do end up in a situation where customers do have multiple sign-up forms. Now, of course, that is then going to define what people fill in, but it's also important that you tell them what they're filling in and indeed what you're going to do with their data. So the next section of the sign-up form creation process is to add a consent statement. And it is optional, but we would strongly recommend that you always have some form of consent statement on your sign-up forms, just to manage the expectation, let people know what you're doing with their data. There is also on that page some links to some guidance from the ICO and the DMA. One thing I would ask, we do get a lot of questions to our support team about the legalities of the GDPR and what have you, and I'm afraid my team are not able to provide you with legal advice. So it is something you would need to discuss internally or with your own legal advisors, but we have got a couple of useful links there. The important thing is obviously you make sure that all of your forms are compliant. Now, when you've created the sign-up form and you are happy with it, you can also tweak what it says and what it looks like. Okay, so you'll see there that small difference, choose preferences or newsletter options. So although technically they are called preferences inside the product, inside the eShot interface, we can customize those headings, those labels. And again, this is a relatively new aspect to the sign up form journey, where you see you have this headings text section where you can define the labels that appear on the sign up form. So if you want to change that, you can. And as you see there, I changed the preference to say newsletter options, and therefore it replaced what was visible in the form itself. Okay, so that is how you set up a sign-up form itself. Okay, obviously there's a few steps to consider. What I would say is it's a good shout to plan these things out before you jump into eShot and start doing them. What you'll receive in follow-up from today's session is a couple of useful links to help articles which explain to you the various steps that we're talking about here in more detail, and you can use them as a step-by-step guide to create your own sign-up forms. The other thing is my professional services team can create them for you. That is a chargeable service that we offer, and be very happy to talk to you if you'd prefer to delegate the fun stuff to us. There's lots more to the sign-up form though, because all we've got at the moment is a form, okay? And now we need to do other things with this form. In other words, what does the customer journey look like when someone completes this form? So moving on to the other elements that I mentioned at the beginning, the next step is to define branding for the form, okay? And again, we've enhanced this area of eShot, so you can either pick a specific logo for this sign-up form, or indeed you can use the branding logo from your account if that's set in settings, so that it automatically pulls through your brand logo. You can also set colors for the buttons and the spaces that divide the form up. And what we would just highlight there is make sure that when you are deciding on button colors and things like that, is you make sure that they are accessible, okay? So effectively, we've got our form, we've got the elements of the form, the various fields that we wanted, the preferences that we want to give people the option to sign up to, and indeed we've tweaked the look and feel of it. The next step is obviously what happens when someone completes the form, which is, the next step in the process is the confirmation page. And the confirmation page is simply a reassuring statement that they have submitted the form. And that also avoids situations where people are kind of pressing the sign up button repeatedly, wondering what happens next. So when you hit the sign up form button on one of the eShot forms, it forwards you to a confirmation page. Okay. Now, by default, you'll be given the option to redirect to a URL, so you can have a kind of generic thank you page, which might be on your own website. But the other thing you can do is just flip that over to a generic message inside eShot. So that difference between the redirect to URL and show a thank you message a little bit further down the page, you're then able to customize the text that's displayed in that space. Okay, so we've got our sign up form, we've branded it. People have hit submit after filling it in, and we've reassured them that indeed their form submission has been successful. Now, the other thing which I kind of skipped over at the beginning is when you first create a sign-up form, you have options for a single opt-in and a double opt-in. And there are 0 circumstances now where I would recommend doing anything other than a double opt-in. Form spam is a very real and large problem where we see people still using single opt-in journeys where email addresses which you really don't want in your database find their way in when you only have a single opt-in journey. So a double opt-in journey protects you, but it also protects the subscriber by enforcing that they must verify that they want to be added to your database before we actually add them to the CRM section of eShot. So the double opt-in journey, the next step after the confirmation page, is to actually send an opt-in email. And the opt-in email, again, we give you simple out-the-box options there, but you can customize as well. So by default, when you go to the opt-in email section, you will be able to use the standard email that's there, and you'll be able to change the text within the email to whatever you like. However, again, if you want to do these things well and properly, what you can actually do is pick a design from your account. So with the email content, you have the option to choose between a standard email and indeed choose email design. And then you can pick an example from your, you can pick an email design from your account. One important thing to note with that is for those emails to work with the sign up journey, they must have the special sign up confirmation URL link in them. So that's a dynamic content value that has to be on a link or on a button within your design. And if that sign up confirmation URL is not in the design, then you can't use that email with the sign up journey. Okay, because that's the special link that effectively calls back to eShot and says, this is the person who signed up, and now I'm confirming that they have done that double opt-in via the email. Excuse me. Then we move on to some more optional steps, but I would still say they're important. So after they've opted in, again, reassure them that that has all worked successfully. You can drive people to a final confirmation email. So the same principle as what we talked about with the confirmation page. You then have the final confirmation page, which is where they end up after they've clicked on the link in the opt-in email. Again, you've got choice there. That can be redirected to your URL, so you could redirect them to your homepage or another piece of content on your website if you want to push a particular proposition at this stage, or indeed eShop will enable you to set your own message. The next step in the process is then a further welcome email. Now, this is entirely optional. You don't have to have this, but what we would strongly recommend for a great sign-up experience, they've filled in the form, they've received a double opt-in confirmation email, they've clicked that link in it to confirm that they definitely want to be a subscriber to your newsletter or newsletters, and then you have a chance to shine. You have a chance to present to them whatever you like, a showcase of your best content, something which effectively pushes them down the customer journey beyond the stage that they've reached so far. Because bear in mind, when people sign up to your newsletter, it might still be a couple of weeks until your next newsletter is due. So having a welcome email once they've been confirmed and added to your database is a good shout. And again, that can be a simple email where you can amend the text in the sign up form journey itself, or indeed you can pick any design that you want from your account to send them something specific. Now, once you've gone through that, your sign up form is ready to go out into the world, okay? And the options here have changed, and to some extent they've become more complicated just because we now live in a world of all sorts of cybersecurity fun. So you have different options for how your form can be published once you've created it, okay? And I'll just explain those because effectively there's lots and lots of different options, okay? So you see there, once you've created the form itself, you have a hosted URL to the individual form. So you have an individual link to the form, which you can link to, you can distribute, you can host wherever you like. Further down the page, you then have some geeky stuff where you can manipulate the JSON for the email. That's far too geeky for me to cover today. And then you also have sign up form code where you can host the form yourself. You can embed it on your website as a button or embed it in another page. Okay, so those embed options have changed. We've just had to adapt what we are able to do just from a cybersecurity perspective. But effectively, the sign up form code that you will host, there's two aspects to it where you have to embed that on your website. And ordinarily, I would recommend, if you're not familiar with that sort of functionality on your own website, is just copy that code, hand it over to your resident geek, and they will be able to sort it out for you. If you get stuck, then speak to our support team and they'll be able to help and guide you. But as I say, the options for publishing a sign-up form and indeed for getting sign-ups in the more general sense have diversified somewhat over the last couple of years. So eShop now supports a whole range of different publishing options. We've got the embed option, as we just looked at. We also have a WordPress plugin. So if you do use WordPress as your CMS, then you can easily get to the various sign-up forms that you've published and add them to WordPress nice and easily. The other thing is you can sign up via API. So where you do have a website with its own native form functionality, then you are able to get your website to talk to us programmatically. And therefore, you don't actually need to create an eShop sign-up form. You can have your own one on your website, but it will still talk to your eShop database. For those that are slightly less geeky, you can achieve the same thing using Zapier. If you don't know what Zapier is, it's an API junction box effectively, where you can get various third-party tools to talk to eShop via API, but it's an API integration that you can program through a kind of an interface which normal people understand, as opposing to need the help of a developer, okay? And then there's one more option, okay? And this option, some of you that are on today's session will be familiar with, and some of you won't, and that is adding the form to a landing page, okay? Landing pages is a function that we introduced exclusively for our public sector customers a couple of years ago. And it's been something which the demand for has grown. And indeed, I'm very pleased to say that next week, as part of an update to eShop, we will be making landing pages generally available to all customers. So for those of you who are already using them, well, you've had your you've had your fun ahead of the rest, but we are now opening those up to be generally available. Okay, and some of you are probably going, well, what on earth is a landing page, Dan? Well, let me show you. When you get to the publish point of the sign up form generator there, you see that option for create a landing page using this sign up form. Okay, so the hosted URL of the form there, obviously that https signup.es-mail.co.uk and then that unique code, that's a perfectly usable URL, but it's not particularly customer friendly and not particularly easy to remember. So a landing page effectively enables you to put a vanity URL, a wrapper around your sign up form, and indeed allows you to do some other things as well. So if you do already have landing pages, carry on paying attention because there's some new toys here as well. If I create a landing page using this sign up form, then effectively the first thing I'll be asked to do is give that landing page a title. Now that's not just an administrative title, that's the kind of the friendly name that will go on the top of the page. It will be visible in the browser, and indeed you can then specify a URL for that landing page. Now by default it will start with a code, and that's for good purpose. What we normally recommend is when you are in the landing page creation process, use the preview function, but if you do need to look at actually publishing it before you put it out in the world, then you can keep it relatively hidden by using a kind of a special URL. But when you're ready to tell the world about your landing page, then you can update that to be something more user-friendly. And that's effectively a website page that will be available for people to then reach your landing page and indeed your sign-up form. We have the same embed option, the same branding options, should I say, that we have the sign-up form available in the landing page function as well, with the added bonus with landing pages, you can actually use custom fonts as well. So if you do have custom fonts defined in your eShot account, then you can customize the look and feel a bit more with a landing page than you can with a sign-up form. If you have already applied branding to your sign-up form, then the landing page will overrule that. Okay, so effectively, when you embed a landing page, when you embed a form inside a landing page, the branding on the landing page will overrule any branding set on the form. Okay, and then you can give it a heading and some body copy. Okay, so you can introduce people to your form. What is this form for? And indeed, what do you want them to do? So in the example I've written there, subscribe to eShot updates. We regularly send best practice newsletters about all things email. To subscribe, please add your details below. Okay, so effectively, whereas the form is just the form, with the landing page, you're then able to add a bit more window dressing, you know, not just the vanity URL and the branding, but you can also have some introductory text on the page as well. Then we get to the call to action, or in other words, the form. However, as I said, there's something new for everybody on today's webinar, and that's where, in addition to hosting a sign-up form inside of a landing page, you can now host links as well. Okay, so the use case here is really to accommodate things whereby you want to provide specific text or links to files which you may not want to share in the public domain. So if you have forms which are effectively operating as squeeze pages, you know, landing pages where you're collecting people's details and giving them access to assets and things like that. If you remember back to when we looked at the form building journey, when we got to the confirmation page stage, you had the opportunity to redirect to a URL. So that URL that you redirect to can actually be an eShot landing page. So for example, you could include a link to a button where someone could get access to the asset. One thing I would point out, though, you do still need to host that file on your own solution. We can't support actually hosting those files with eShot. But effectively, that's an update for those of you who already got landing pages. You can now have landing pages with links to download assets on them as well. But the normal use case, the one we started off building this page for, is the third option there, which is to include a sign-up form. Okay. And all the sign-up forms that are ready and built within your account will be available as a list here. And you simply put the slider to on, and then that sign-up form will be embedded inside your landing page. Very importantly, you can only have obviously one form per landing page. If you have multiple forms, you can have multiple landing pages. Last but not least, you can put a footer on that, which again, similar principle to the what we talked about in the sign up form journey. There can be footer text, there can be privacy policy links, effectively reassure people that you're doing things by the book when they submit their detail on this page. And then you have the option to preview or publish that. And this is what it looks like. So a combination of all those elements, the branding, the headline, the body copy, the fields, the contact detail fields that I chose earlier on, the birthday field that we talked about in terms of the special kind of field, the pick list field with the contact type there. Then we get the preferences. Then we get the sign up form button itself. And then last but not least, those elements for the footer defined in the landing page. So it's a combination of the things that we configured in the sign up form and indeed the landing page. The reason that there's a lot of crossover there is obviously because you can have multiple landing pages with the same sign up form. And indeed, you can have multiple sign up forms, multiple landing pages. There's kind of lots of options here to have a myriad of different combinations to ensure that you can present people lots of options to sign up to your newsletters and to your other things that you're offering in the public domain. Okay, so they're really versatile tools. As I say, there's been a lot of development work done on this in the last year to kind of enhance it and make sure it answers as many customer needs as we can. We are making further enhancements to it as well. So we'll shortly be introducing the ability to have nested categories of preferences where you can actually kind of collapse them into accordions as well. Some of you already have that, and you'll know that we have to custom code that, but that will be supported in the UI very shortly as well. And this is, generally speaking, is an area where we are trying to enhance what eShop can do and indeed be responsive to customer feedback in terms of the various different functions that are available. Now, as I said, landing pages have been around for some time for our public sector customers. We finally got the infrastructure and the various kind of really geeky stuff behind the scenes in place to be able to open that up to a wider audience. So I'm very pleased to announce, as I said, that landing pages will be generally available to all customers from the 21st of July. However, there are some technical prerequisites. Okay, so that mainly relates to the domain which you use with eShop for your links, your sending domain, as it's often referred to. And we do need to check the configuration of that before it's guaranteed that you can use landing pages. For those of you who obviously already got it, that's already set up and configured, and you'll have instant access to some of the newer functionality that I've talked about today. But for those who haven't got the function so far, we just need to check the stuff behind the scenes and then enable you to use that function. Okay, and what you will see next week is there'll be some pre-release comms going out, and you'll have the option to request for that landing page function to be turned on in your account if you don't already have it. One thing I would also like to point out is landing pages is a function which is limited depending on your eShop subscription. So we have the 3 different functionality levels. And as you may remember, we updated eShop Marketing Cloud to become eShop Ultimate earlier this year. And the good news is forms remain unlimited across all the different versions of eShop. In other words, you can have as many forms as you like. In terms of the number of preferences that you're able to have, that's not, preference centers. You can only have 1 preference center per sub account. But in terms of the number of options, the number of sign-up options, we do have limits now in terms of 10 for eShop Email, 50 for eShop Auto, and an unlimited number for eShop Ultimate. Those are sub account limits though. So if you do have multiple sub accounts, then you get additional capacity. Landing pages. Obviously, as you can imagine, hosting websites or effectively microsites, it's not the most insignificant thing for us to do from a logistics perspective, and that's why with eShop Email you get 1 landing page included in your subscription. The idea being you can host your main sign-up form. For those that want to do things on a more industrial scale, you would need eShop Auto or eShop Ultimate to be able to support multiple landing pages. Okay. And that is just about it for what I wanted to show you today. Just a couple more things before we wrap things up and see if there's any questions as well, though. In addition to the enhancements we're making to forms and landing pages, there is a new SMS flow, which will be released next week as well. So again, look out for our pre-release comms because we've enhanced the UI and the functionality that's available for SMS. And I'm afraid I've got a little bit of bad news for those of you who are, how should I put this, creatures of habit. We did announce it earlier in the year. I have to confirm now that the legacy drag and drop, we will be ending support at the end of this month. Okay, so as you may know, we introduced the Smart Editor just over 2 years ago now, and I'm happy to report that the vast majority of emails that are created in eShot now are done using the Smart Editor. I know there are some customers that just, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and they keep on using the legacy drag and drop. We're not removing the function. It's still there. It will still work in your eShot account. But if you run into issues with it, then I'm afraid the support team will no longer be able to help you. Their solution for you will be effectively to migrate you to the Smart Editor. So I just need to drop that little bit of bad news in there at the end. But I hope most of you would probably acknowledge, those that certainly have made the jump already, the Smart Editor in terms of what you're able to do with it, the functionality that's available, and the reliability of the designs that come out of it are vastly superior. So just a couple of important things that we're changing in terms of what we do and what we support customers with as a consequence of next week's release. And that's about my lot for today. So I think, almost bang on time for once.